Well, anyway, thank you all for joining. It's 12:30, so I figured I'd get started with the formal presentation. I'm, working in and around Microsoft so long, I like a presentation. So there you go. So that's what I'm doing. So anyway, and again, like I said, this was something I was thinking about. I've talked about flipping the script before, and I feel like I use this in many ways in my own life and with clients. Flipping the script means a few things to me, and I dictating it towards the fear narrative, which I'm going to talk about what that is as well here in a second. So let's see if we get a slide flip here. Woohoo, there we go. So I was talking with Tracy Talley, who's one of my team members, and we were talking about, the virus and the crisis that we're in right now. And she was talking about working for some big brands and about how, everybody was always talking about disruption. And we hear that a lot in technology, in the technology world, that was a disruptor. And even in the consumer world, we hear it. And, the pace of change has never been this fast and will never be this slow again. And man, I feel like, like Uber, for example, big disruption to that industry. And so many of the new gig economy kind of things have been disruptions. But I don't think we as a human race have seen a disruption in our lives. This monumental, there are many disruptions in our lives, but probably since 9/11, the, tragedy of 9/11. And that incident happened and made massive changes to our world. So disruption, I think, is the largest harbinger of change that we have. And whew, what a disruption we are in right now, right? And with that kind of disruption and change and crisis, there's lots of things that go through our heads. I kind of put them into blocks here, and I think these are all things that I have had run through my head, and I know in talking to friends, they've had running through their heads. Does this sound familiar? What will happen? Am I doing enough? How are my kids? Am I being helpful? Will our borders close? When will I be able to hug someone again? When will we go back to what is normal? Which I don't really like that word, but I think those are things that we're all thinking about right now. And all of this, some of these things run through our heads at any given moment, even say 3 months ago, 6 months ago, a year ago, 10 years ago. These are all sometimes questions that go through our minds because we worry. Our brains are kind of set up for that, unfortunately. So I think our brains really love to put this narrative on a heavy repeat rotation, like that one-hit wonder song that plays on the radio over and over again, that earworm. And I'm not going to bring up one of those songs here because we have enough on our minds, but I think what I call the fear narrative, it comes from our brains being millions of years old, from that fight or flight reaction to things that put us in danger, right? That is the lovely, not so lovely, lizard brain. So, billions of years old, and it craves this energy and worry. The fear narrative really requires fuel and lots of it. It's kind of like that, I don't know, I think of it like Sunday fun day brunch, right? Where you have the eggs and the bacon and the pancakes and the biscuits and gravy and the toast with homemade preserves. And that giant meal is like so good when you're chomping it down, but then that meal like leaves you completely sluggish and with a stomach ache. It's too much, too rich for our bodies. Well, what happens with all of this worry and the stress is that it fuels that fear narrative, and that leads to terrible things in our body. We love control. Humans love to try and control things, and this loss of control, or what is normal right now, is at this epic peak. And our fears at any given time are about things that could happen, not usually what is happening in the moment. And right now, in the moment, lots of things are happening, but that is that worry and fearful thinking that really, really affects us. The thing is, though, is that when something does go sideways, when it actually happens, we go into action and we face the moment. If any of the things that were on those questions actually happened, we would deal with them. If XYZ actually happened, we would deal with them, because that's what we're made of, and that's who we are, and that's how we react with things. And sometimes those reactions are positive and you go into a certain mode. Sometimes it's negative and you go into other modes of, getting down. But the thing is to me, when we're running this narrative, we're giving energy to things that have not yet happened. And I think that we're not helping ourselves or anyone else when we run this narrative. And that's what really takes many people into depression and disappointment and disease. So when we worry, we give fear all the power, controlling everything is like boiling the ocean, and it's not something we could ever really take on or that we should do, even though we're kind of doing it ourselves already. But there is so much in life that's beyond our control. But the thing that I think we can control is our thoughts and what we watch and what we take in and what we consume, and then how we feel about those things and how we talk to ourselves. And I think that requires some thoughtfulness and maybe a practice, and then some decision making. In the time of crisis, there are real fears. But in order to keep going and to keep our strength to combat the reality of any given moment, I think we really need to dig deep and find that positive, hopeful, action-filled warrior that lives inside of each of us. And I believe that each of us has that. That's also who we are. That sits next to that lizard brain. The other one that we're combating in conjunction with the lizard brain is that imposter syndrome, thinking that, we're not enough or we're a fraud. This one comes up a lot in business. It comes up a lot when people are trying to change jobs. And I also think it may come up now because people are completely changing their businesses, what they're doing, what their jobs are. They've lost jobs. And so I think people are having to recreate themselves right now. And you're looking at jobs and thinking, oh, maybe I don't have all those skills. Or the thing is, you know what, right now we need everybody and in a myriad of places. And I think that there's a lot of kindness and compassion and thought going into people who say, I want to take the next step in my career, or I want to try something different. And so I'm seeing a lot of positivity around folks who were doing one thing and decided to jump into something different, and that people are being open to possibilities around that. And I hope that business owners and people who are doing hiring continue that kind of thing, especially right now, because it's important for us that, for folks who are trying to, pay for their lives and keep food coming in and all of that, to have opportunities that they may not have had before. Things I think I'm going to ask myself a year from now, and maybe you will as well. How did I use my time? Did I do my part? Was I sharing my most authentic self? How are people recovering from this trauma? If I've lost a loved one, how am I recovering from that trauma? What did I lean into? Who did I look to? What did I consume that helps me cope? How is my life different or better? I'm not trying to say, silver linings here are tough. People say that all the time when bad things happen. Oh, the silver lining is, and all of that. And I do agree with that in some ways. And I think we do have a great opportunity to look at our lives. And I think these stress and worry feeders with our fear narrative, I think we can combat them by this thing that I'm calling flip the script. I don't know why this happened. The world, universe, Gaia, God, just the way it is, things happen. And I think this moment is really asking us to take stock, to see what we need, maybe, rather than what we want, and maybe do some reevaluation of our lives and how we live. I hope when this crisis is over, and hopefully it will be sooner rather than later, and we've gone through this, what feels like a slowing down, this staying put, this intense time of quarantine, we're away from each other, that we're going to discover new ways of working, relating, loving, parenting, looking at our differences and how we move and shake in the world. I think that the breakneck pace that we've all become accustomed to can maybe change if we want it to. And I think that takes some decision and this time to do some of that reevaluation. This is all me. I came up with this, and I really believe in a concept that I think combats fear, and that concept is about awareness and changing thoughts and reframing. And I call it flipping the script. And I wrote about this last year, and I use this phraseology, if you will, in how I approach creating new messages with clients. Russ and I do that a lot with our clients, and how to rethink how they tell the stories of their business and their personal brand. But I also believe that it applies to this everyday fear narrative that runs in our minds. And I do think everyone has it, and it pervades a lot of our lives, whether it's work or home. And here's the other thing: we don't often share these thoughts, and we struggle with them alone. We don't even realize that it's running a lot of the time too, you know? I think it's really up to each of us to work on our practice to hopefully change this narrative. And if we do this for ourselves, we become stronger and we become more helpful to others who have the same narrative running. And that's everyone, right? The concept of flipping the script is based on a mental health technique or therapy that's called reframing or cognitive reframing. I've done a lot of research on this, and it requires us to see something in a new way, a change in mindset, seeing something in a positive or negative light as needed. And it's, I believe, a really powerful way to strengthen ourselves against running the fear narrative. You know, the frame of the picture or the thought necessarily doesn't change, but the picture within the frame can be flipped or an alternate one. And it's sometimes that the situation doesn't necessarily change either. You know, we're not going to snap our fingers and have this crisis and this virus be over. It is not all of a sudden going to go away in a miracle, unfortunately, I don't believe. So I think the situation doesn't change, but how you view it and how you feel about it does. I'm obviously not a therapist or a doctor, but I think that many of my favorite authors have written about this, and I'll talk through those a little bit. And I use this in my life to keep my lizard brain, my imposter syndrome at bay. And like anything else, I believe these things are a practice, a lot like the morning emerge stuff I talked about. One thing I'll say is I had a client that I met with last week on a personal brand workshop, and we talked a lot about the emerge. And you know, it was cool because we went through it and talked through, and I had two clients actually with this, and they said, you know, I have a morning routine that works for me in the morning, and it includes, you know, either, you know, like getting up, showering, coffee. And I was like, okay, great. Then change your emerge to whatever it is that helps you. And one of them said, I would like to put this in my schedule at 9 a.m. And I was like, awesome. And another person was like, you know what, this is great. I'm going to take this piece. I like journaling in the morning, but then I'm going to do the rest of it in the afternoon when I'm feeling sluggish and I need a lift and all of that. So I want to do my exercise and some reading. And I was like, right on, you know, all of these things really that anybody is talking about, any coach or, you know, these business books and stuff, you have to adapt whatever it is so that it works for you, right? We all have our favorites in the world, and you'll see some of mine here. And, you know, it's about taking the bits and bobs and pieces of the people that speak to you, that you really connect with, and then make it your own. You know, there is no right way to do really anything. There are a myriad of ways to do things that work for you and your family and your teammates that you work with at work. And so that was a really cool conversation that I had with both of them. And so I was like, take this worksheet and maybe use it as a guideline. And if you want to put it into something else or put it into your calendar, you know, I'm a big fan of the written pen to page stuff. I feel like there's something about that that's really tactile, and it helps it set it in your brain. But if you use a computer, if you use To-Do or you use Planner or whatever it is that you use to keep things on track for yourself, do it. You know, again, no rules. And even if you have to touch your phone when you get up in the morning, you know what, so be it, right? It is what works for you. So here's the three of the flipping the script that I came up with and that I use. So the first step in flipping the script is really admitting that we have a fear narrative, and all of us do, whether there's a pandemic happening or not. And I think that's something that's hard to admit. Even if it's one negative thought, that's still part of a narrative that is running in your head. And I think it's obviously heightened right now. But maybe think about a few months ago. There are probably things that you were worried and stressed about, or even a year ago. If we kind of simply admit that we have that negative voice, and some people call it a really bad word that I won't say. I'll say a jerk, maybe. How about that? That jerk voice in your head. I've heard people call it the in your head as well. But I think that is really, really important. And, this quote here by John Acuff. This is a great book. John Acuff, Start, Punch Fear in the Face, Escape Average, and Do the Work That Matters. John is fantastic. He's doing little Facebook snippets right now on his YouTube channel. He is, I believe, at his in-laws' place somewhere, I think in the Carolinas or on the East Coast and outside of his norm. And he is wonderful. He's got a bunch of books, and I highly recommend reading John's stuff. And this is from his, and it talks about, that there's no one's internal voice says, you're skinny enough, you're pretty enough, you're going to be great on that project. Unfortunately, I think if you think for a second about that, that's pretty true, unfortunately. And he's got a great chapter about this. And one of the things that I think is super powerful, as you know, I believe in the power of writing. And so I suggest this awareness and understanding whatever that old story or negative thoughts are. I like the term old story because I believe, and this came from my friend Louis Parent, who also loves Bill Withers. Louis and I talked, this is a while ago, and we talked about how life is a book and that you write the chapters of your life in your book. And then you get down to the pages and you write the page every day. And sometimes, because of how life is in the universe or energy or God or whatever you believe in, that you sometimes got to go back and reread a chapter because you haven't learned the lesson that you were supposed to learn before you go to the next chapter in your book. And I love that concept. And so I think that a writing prompt for this would be to take a moment and write it all down. Get a pen and a paper and write down all the things that you're worried about or fearful of right now and put them down on a page. I do this a lot, and there's something to getting things out of your head and onto a piece of paper that is really cathartic and I think really helpful, because you kind of, what we're trying to do is remove them, if you will. It's sort of trying to get that stuff out and put it on the page. And I do it a lot. And it's not a one and done kind of thing. It's one of those things that I think it's active to do until you really tell that voice to shut up, or in Espanol, cállate la boca, a phrase that I love that I learned from my Spanish teacher in high school, Dr. Rivera, a long time ago. But I'm a big fan of the actual pen and paper to do this. So this is about awareness and about writing it down and putting it on a page if you can. The next step is, so how do we change those negative thoughts into positive ones? I love writer and guide Anne Lamott. It's one of the best books in the world about being a writer, Bird by Bird, some instructions on writing and life. And a very famous chapter that a lot of people point to is called Shitty First Drafts, pardon my French. And she talks a lot about the different personas of the people, of the voices in her head. And one of them is the vinegar-lipped reader lady who says, well, that's not very interesting, isn't it? And she goes on to name the voices in her head and talk about them. And she's one of the best writers out there. And you don't have to be a writer for this to be the case. I think that even sometimes naming the voices in your head is not a bad thing to do. The thing about this section is about, taking that page that you wrote, the one that holds all the fear and the worry and the stress, and take it. And this is where you're flipping the script, is that can you scratch out all the negative things and words and change them to positive ones about who you are? So like one side is the negative stuff and the other side is the positive stuff. And leading with phrases like, I believe, I think, I am. And this goes into doubt language, which I talk about as well, as far as when you're presenting and talking about, when you're like, well, it's like this or like that, or maybe, or, when you say, I think that flipping the script is the most powerful thing you can do for yourself to change your fear narrative. You kind of believe me, right? Yeah. I hope so, because I do believe it. So it's that column of negative and looking to make a column of positive. And then I also, again, that writing these down and then changing them in your brain when you're connected to your heart and your hands is, I think, how we learn to do this then without having to write them down. The idea is to make this a practice so that you don't need to do that column. You don't need to do the column work. You are making those changes in real time as your brain says something to you and you go, nope, that is not the way this is, right? That's what we want to get to. And I work on that all the time. I have a negative thought and I'm like, what are you doing? Nope. And what we say out into the world is really important. I think words matter. And when you say things out into the universe, that's why that Power of Positive Thinking book that's been around for so long is so popular. Putting negative energy and thoughts out into the world, it's not good. And the more positive, good things you can put out into the world and say about yourself and say about the situation you're in, like, there's things that are going on in my life right now that there are a couple I'm like, oh man. And I'm like, and then I look at sort of the grand scale of what's going on and I'm like, nope. Gratitude, grateful, kindness, and compassion towards myself at any given moment. And it is a flip that I have to do. I have to flip the switch and flip the script. I say this a lot too. Olympic swimmers, you know what they do a lot? Anyone? They swim a lot. And so flipping the script requires practice and rehearsal to get this behavior and to get that click to happen in real time. So Brene Brown, so many people look to her. I do. She's been an amazing influence in my life. Some of her books have really changed my life. Daring Greatly, that came out from her, was definitely something. Braving the Wilderness. Also, she has got an amazing 1-hour Netflix special that is fantastic. And if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend you see it with your partner, with your friends, your family. It's something you could do a watch party on and then have a discussion about it. It is really beautiful about being brave and vulnerable and wholehearted, and how a lot of the times we're leading with shame, which is the next door neighbor to fear. So practicing the reframing, I love her quote here that, and I know it's a lot of words, but it's, when we have the absence of data, we make up stories, and we make up stories when we're hurt. And so sometimes when somebody, a partner or family member, says something or does something, you take it in and you make it about something that maybe it's not. And that is part of that fear narrative. And instead of asking somebody what they meant, we decide what they meant and put a layer on it that probably isn't there. It's a hard thing to do and a hard thing to learn, but I think it's really, really important. And she talks about the rumbling with the truth. And I love that. It's like, how do you rumble with the truth? Because the truth and getting to positivity, sometimes you got to rumble with it. You got to get in there and really make those changes. I think, I believe really in the power of writing and sharing and letting go. I love a step in here where you potentially share that list with somebody that's close to you in your life. And that's a big step. And I know that. But I feel like that is also a way to open up a conversation with a partner or a friend or a family member, maybe, that is going to help both of you as well. In this week, the last couple of weeks, my worry has been about all the in-person events and speaking engagements that I do that are a big part of my income, and they all went away, and I really enjoy making payroll and paying for my life. And I could have gone into deep worry and given tons and tons of energy to it. But for me, turning things like that into forward motion made me go, okay, how am I going to deal with this? Let's take an action. This all happened. What's the action? Okay, I'm going to worry about it. But I went and looked up some warm leads. I reached out to friends and colleagues. I said, I need your help. Do you know of anything? What's going on in your organization? You know my skills, all of that kind of thing. And, running a small business, you're always going after it, right? And I work on this daily, and in reaching out and being vulnerable and saying what was going on, got some projects to open up, and that's always a good thing. So I think, practicing the reframing is super important. So taking that page, working through it, saying those things out loud. I even sometimes when I will take that page that I've written and scribbled out and got the other side, that sucker goes up on my bathroom mirror and I look at it in the morning as part of what I do and go, yep, and read all those things out loud. I actually woke up to Jason Stevenson the other night. I was having some trouble sleeping and I love him, and I left it on, and I normally don't sleep with music on, but I woke up in the morning and I was like, what is that Australian man? Who is that? Like, I was kind of dreamy still, you know, and it was like, I am strong, I am powerful, I am fantastic, I am ready to take on the day. And I was like, this is fantastic, who is that, you know? And it was one of those things that totally surprised me. So I feel like those positive affirmations are really, really important and can be part of that maybe emerge, or that moment at 3 o'clock when you're like, I really want a latte. Maybe go into your bathroom or go on your phone or wherever you've put it and read those things out loud to yourself and remind yourself that you're awesome. And that, yes, there are fears, there are worry. I am worried right now about a lot of things as well. But I think it's also figuring out how we continue to change and flip that script and do it in real time, you know? Whoop. I'm gonna put this back up. I'm probably gonna put this in every one. I love this quote from Dune, and you must not fear. Fear is the mind killer, and I will face it when it's gone. Only I remain, you know? I think that's a narrative to me that I wanna run in my head. And it's something that I have and I read in the morning and remind myself of that. And, you know, our fears hold us back from being our true selves. And sometimes we're often afraid of taking care of ourselves, and really working on ourselves, I think, is a gift that we give to ourselves and the world. Um, and fear often stops us from going after the burning desires we have. That childhood voice in our head that comes out, sometimes that isn't the positive one, that runs that fear narrative. I think it's super important to remember that we have beautiful, amazing people in our lives who love us and who care about our well-being. Everybody does. I know. And I hope I do that for all of you and all the friends and family I have in my life. And so don't forget to reach out, and don't forget to share some of this stuff with other people and talk about it. If we don't talk about it, you keep it inside, and that fear narrative just runs and runs and runs. And I'm going to put up a last slide of so many people in my life, in my community, in my technical community, that I know that at any given time I could lean on. And I did this last week, you know? So think about your personal fear narrative and think about how to flip the script on it. And there's many ways to do that. This is just something that I thought of, come up with, and do for myself. And I think, you know, having that awareness and doing the writing of it and then practicing it it's a trifecta, hopefully, of change that you can bring into your life. And I hope that's helpful, because I think, you know, affirmations are really important, and just understanding our brains and our physiology is important too. Is that there's nothing that we're doing wrong. It's just that we're wired that way. And so it's acknowledging that we're wired a certain way and deciding to change it, you know, or enhance it, or push it out, you know, all of those things. So anyway, that's what I wanted to talk about today. And that's how to get a hold of me. You're probably already connected to me anyway, but there's been a lot of new folks in here that other people have invited. So that's my email address. CreativeMaven.com is the marketing, Content Pandas software. And we do have, and I write all the time on Medium and my blog on Creative Maven. And then we are doing podcasts. We've got 57 in the can or something like that. This season, almost all of the podcasts are also video, so you can see me interviewing somebody, and those are up on our Creative Maven YouTube channel. And if you would like to be a guest on the show, just send us a note. There's a contact form on the website, and love to have you on. So I think I'm on the money on time today. How about that? Hi, Clara. Hey. So anyway, I appreciate your time, and I hope that's helpful. And feel free to share it with someone else. If you have any questions about it, let me know. I'm online most of the time, and that is flipping the script on that fear narrative. Please stay safe, please stay healthy, and wash those hands, stay home, and sending you big, big, mwah, giant virtual hugs and kisses from me. And that's it. And then I got to figure out how to turn this off. So I'm going to do that. Okay. Thank you for showing up, everybody, and be safe and talk soon. Okay. Thanks, everybody. All right, here we go. What you do is you click stop, share. And one more time to stop the live. Bye, everybody.